Hey everyone, this is Anirban Datta, and today I'm excited to host Ms Yomna El-Awamri, the founder and the CEO of the Carbon Impact Lab, to a podcast in collaboration with the BRICS Youth Energy Agency. Ms. Yomna, welcome to our podcast, and how are you doing?
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here, and I'm very happy to join you here to just speak about young entrepreneurs and how they can help in the just transition and climate agenda.
We are looking forward to the conversation, and we are interested to have you, especially when it comes to the dialogue regarding businesses and energy sector, cross-border partnerships, and especially the role of BRICS nations in this particular juncture. So in this particular podcast, especially when we are focusing on business in the energy sector, how do you see the BRICS tackling climate change and BRICS Youth Energy's involvement in it, in achieving net zero emission goals?
Well, I think what's unique about BRICS and the initiative here, BRICS Young Expert Groups, is that this is a new direction in changing the game for climate change and the energy sector, because this is a representation of the global South, more like the dominance of the Western countries in the conversation of climate change. This will provide a new perspective on how we can move forward with proper representation of the global South countries, especially with the new addition of BRICS countries, adding two new groups like Middle Eastern countries and African countries. This adds more and more representation of other countries that didn't really have a lot in terms of voicing their opinions in the global agenda for climate change.
This is a very interesting dialogue that you put forward, especially when we are talking with the developing countries in Asia and Africa. How exactly do you think business in the energy sector can flourish in the BRICS YEA, especially involving the young generation in the developing countries of Asia and Africa?
Well, what's very interesting about this is that the private sector has a big role in why we're here when it comes to global warming and climate change, due to industrialization and the history of carbon emissions. And without changing their role, we're not going to be able to reach the agenda that we want to have in terms of tackling climate change and the climate crisis. And given the intergenerational equity issue, and given that young generations are the ones that are going to pay the price, they're much more conscious and they're much more committed when it comes to achieving the climate agenda. And this is where I see the role of the entrepreneurs in this case. So the private sector is well known for its power in bringing new products and technologies to the market, hastening structural changes that we need in the economies by regulating different industries and resources. And in turn, it can drive forward productivity and raise living standards across the economy. So when we take a look at or bring together the role of the private sector with a focus on young entrepreneurs, we can see here that they have a huge role to play in driving forward the just transition and achieving the climate agenda, given the commitment and the power of entrepreneurship in economic development.
Your statements very well relate to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals of 2030 and its agenda under it, where from infrastructure to climate change, each and every aspect of today's life is focused on. So in this juncture, the role of technology and infrastructure also comes up. And we usually see developing countries are not that advanced in terms of infrastructure, in terms of energy efficiency. How do you think we can encourage mingled technology and young people, especially in the developing countries, to flourish on energy businesses and to lay the foundation for the future?
So what's good about young people and technologies is that you'll find that the data says that almost 70% of young people are already transitioned into using new technologies such as AI and blockchain technology and all of the other technologies that are kind of being pushed forward nowadays. And the main issue is infrastructure and old systems or mechanisms that are hard to transition to new tech. And this is where young people and entrepreneurship specifically helps to bridge this gap. So you'll find that entrepreneurs actually help bridge the gaps that infrastructure can't provide for in developing countries specifically, especially in countries in Asia and Africa. You'll find grassroots initiatives, and young entrepreneurs are the ones that provide off-grid solutions, for example, for remote areas that don't have access to energy. So off-grid solutions, things like that that have minimal cost or put minimal inputs and resources, but have a huge return for those remote areas that the government or the major investment can't really tap into. And in this case, I think the potential for young people, especially in developing countries, is huge, because let's face it, we have a huge resource, which is we have a huge number of people. So while population increase is not a very positive thing, however, if we take a look at the numbers in Africa and in India and in different countries that we have in the BRICS countries, you'll find that if we tap into these resources through knowledge exchange between those countries that have already transitioned into tech and using technologies, and countries that still have these kinds of challenges, and just having more knowledge transfer between those countries, will be able to utilize the huge number or huge population numbers of those young groups, because you'll find that also most of the numbers there are young people. So the majority of the population are people that are considered youth. So this is a huge resource, in my opinion. So instead of looking for natural resources, which we all have a lot when it comes to also BRICS countries, however, it's still untapped due to the different barriers you mentioned in terms of investment and infrastructure barriers and all of that. So I see that young people are a huge resource. It's just untapped or not fully tapped. And it has unique challenges that are not really being focused on right now. And I think if we just try to provide more support for entrepreneurs and young people, we'll be able to have a huge change in terms of tech transfer and tech transition, and also climate change and solving the climate crisis.
You gave some of the interesting statistics regarding the importance of natural resources that you stressed very correctly, that BRICS countries have it in a lot. And also you talked about the importance of off-grid technologies and off-grid sources of electricity. How do you think, how do you envision involving young entrepreneurs, especially with regard to off-grid technologies? Because none of the countries are actually equipped with it. And most of the countries, like especially, let's say India, somewhat invested towards school, but like India is doing a very great job with regard to solar energy. How do you think we can make grid and off-grid sources of energy by involving the youth in the sector? Because in terms of electricity, the participation of the youth still remains a bit minimal to a certain extent.
Yes, which is a shame, to be honest, because the solutions that come from young people are actually quite innovative and don't require a huge investment as opposed to corporations and large government initiatives. And this remains one of the issues that young people face due to lack of regulation or bureaucracy in different governments that is not allowing young people to reach their full potential when it comes to developing solutions. Investment is also one of the biggest barriers, especially for energy and climate startups. We took a great hit after the pandemic, and until now, the numbers haven't reached the pre-COVID numbers in terms of investment. And this is one of the major issues that we're still grappling with right now. For BRICS countries, I see that we have a huge potential of creating cross-border partnerships between the different countries by capitalizing on the strength of each country. So like I mentioned before, some of the countries have huge numbers of population, especially African countries. And now we don't only have South Africa, we also have Ethiopia and Egypt as an addition to the African representation in BRICS countries. So we can utilize this plus, for example, China's huge manufacturing and industrial potential to transfer knowledge or to tap into the resources that China has to make sure that we can scale up, for example, the small resources that we have when it comes to young entrepreneurs and their business models. other solutions that we can have. One perfect example is investing in startups and driving more investment and collaboration. So India, they did the Startup India event. I think this is one of the best examples that we can have if we can do something like this for BRICS countries as a whole and allow trade to happen between those countries so that entrepreneurs can actually transfer their strength from one country to the other. Also, partnerships between the government and the entrepreneurs should happen. So in that case, in order to prevent this barrier that entrepreneurs have when it comes to energy solutions, which are mainly being controlled by large corporations or it's already a government initiative. So in that case, the governments can't actually offer parts of the planning for energy transition through entrepreneurs, whether through investment or creating certain policies that will provide entrepreneurs let's say the landscape needed for them to push forward. And it could be a win-win situation. So in that case, for the areas that the governments can't reach, for example, or big corporations can't access, then in this case, we can capitalize on the access of young entrepreneurs into rural areas and remote areas, for example. And in this way, we can actually help entrepreneurs into doing what they do best, which is innovating and providing new, unique solutions for problems that we face every day. And at the same time, this will help already problems or challenges that the governments face.
This is a very interesting discussions that we are going into, especially when you're talking with regard to funding, innovation. How exactly do you think that the young entrepreneurs who are still new into the market and new into this business, into this world, how exactly do you think they can innovate to attract more funding and more investments into this specific sector? And what will be your advice to these booming businesses and entrepreneurs?
So one major thing that they need is to learn and keep on learning. And it's a twofold solution. So from their side, they need to try to secure learning opportunities in the field as much as they can. R&D is something that needs to be invested in and invested in a lot in order for us to reach the business models and the tech that we need, or to make the tech usable. So not only on a small scale, but also to be able to scale this up. And from that perspective, we need to have partnerships between universities, for example, so that they can allow young entrepreneurs to test out some of their business models or their MVPs in their facilities, and to be able to actually have these solutions and commercialize it later on as part of their business model. Having partnerships between whether governments or the private sector and universities and academic institutions and the startups will be, I think it has huge potential, which is why nowadays we'll find that there is a trend for startup incubators and accelerators that are university-based. On the other hand, we need for young entrepreneurs to really learn and to keep on learning and innovating. And innovation has to be harnessed. So in that case, I think, especially in BRICS countries, we have a lot of expertise in each country. And if we can allow the collaboration, not only through investment or trading, but also through knowledge transfer, that would be huge. And in that case, collectively, we can have better solutions and better innovation hubs that will actually provide more feasible solutions for the challenges that we're facing, and also to do this in a way that's financially viable and will also achieve the goal of economic development, not just environmental sustainability.
You rightly spoken about the importance of patenting and youth innovation, energy efficiency. So how do you think that the youth, especially in the developing countries, let's say in rural villages can help innovation camps, and these things can help the young entrepreneurs in terms of patenting, in terms of legal frameworks, in terms of understanding the business climate in those specific countries?
Well, that's why I think networks, the importance of networks such as this network for young people at the BRICS countries is very important, because we're not just benefiting from exchanging investments or deals, but we're also exchanging knowledge and tapping into the different networks that we have. And if you remain isolated, especially in rural areas, like you mentioned, you will miss a lot of opportunities and access to a lot of markets and resources. And this is where I think governments and investors and private sector collectively should focus and offer new policies that will facilitate this and bridge this gap between those who are living in rural areas in order to be able to tap into these solutions. So you'll find that a lot of the programs being pushed nowadays to encourage entrepreneurship is focusing on rural areas. So for example, here in Egypt, we have a lot of programs that are tackling Upper Egypt, which is very far away from the center, Cairo. And this helps drive innovation that is needed in these areas. And you'll find that these areas are actually, they have very unique innovations that we at the center of the country, you wouldn't necessarily be able to develop these because your challenges are quite different and you have access to a lot of resources. So let's not underestimate the value they provide as well, because having a lot of challenges also provides access to a lot of innovation given the lack of resources that you have. So just providing networks such as this one that will tap into different countries, which is one of the things I'm very happy about this, is that the network is not only for BRICS countries, it's also for Global South countries. So we have people from Mexico, we have people from Nigeria, we have people from different countries, just to collectively drive forward the Global South movement.
So how exactly do you think indigenous knowledge and indigenous education can help in sustaining, especially focusing on energy sustainability? Because most of the grid approaches or off-grid approaches, especially with regard to electricity generation, especially with regard to other aspects of energy security and efficiencies, is focused on fossil fuels, and somewhat it is still directed towards importance of oil, fossil fuels, and other topics that brings a certain degree of contentions in our planet. How exactly do you think indigenous knowledge can help in this particular endeavor?
I think we have a lot to learn from indigenous knowledge. To be honest, I think, and the data actually provides evidence that if indigenous communities are actually living much more sustainably than the rest of the world, and there's a lot to learn there. And local knowledge specifically, you'll find that as you deal with indigenous groups more, you'll find that they have more of a connection with nature, such respect for nature, versus us more westernized communities that are very industrialized and don't have a lot of respect for the environment, which is why we're here. So I think you'll find a lot of the solutions that they're already doing and have been doing for years and years are actually, nowadays people are kind of shocked and happy. Wow, you're doing this and you're providing your own resources for this and that. And you have a system that's fully functional for an indigenous group. And we're trying to implement this on a larger scale to bring back the clock so that we don't face all of this environmental crises that we're facing. So I think we need to learn from them a lot. I'm not an expert on this because I haven't lived in rural areas before. However, I've been working in the development sector for 12 years. And the more I deal with indigenous groups and the more I deal with people living in rural areas, the more I learn that what we're doing is not necessarily the best. or if it is, there are things that we have to learn from them about living within the natural resources that we have, the respect for biodiversity, how to utilize resources that we have without changing the ecosystem, the environmental ecosystem that we have. using resources that we already have, such as biofuel and all of this, in order to provide energy versus fossil fuels. So there are a lot to learn from them. And I think a balance between their what they do and what the world is doing right now, I think would really help in giving them space when it comes to the conversation, and at the same time and solving the issues that we're facing due to fossil fuels and global warming and climate change.
Let's say you were given the opportunity to design and to launch a program targeting the rural areas. How will you do it, especially when you have a significant degree of experience in this particular field? If you're given the opportunity, and how do you envision this whole program?
Well, the first step would be to speak to the indigenous groups. Sometimes they know what's needed, but they just don't have the resources for it, or they don't have the access for it. So this is one of the most important things, and not necessarily in the form of a needs assessment, but maybe as an assets mapping. So we see what's already working there, and then to scale it up according to the best, given the inputs that we have. I think one of the best models that you can have is to have an integrative model where you have access to energy, and this energy you use it, for example, in agriculture, and you use the water, for example, through desalination or through, depending on the status of the water there, and using systems that are water and energy efficient, and then through that, the byproducts from this as well, we can use in other products so that we don't have to for example, hurt the environment through the byproducts that come from any of these processes. And at the same time, we can have other products so that we can create a more of a circular economy model in there, and be able to provide for the community as a whole. And at the same time, you can add any element that you want. You can add carbon credits as one of the elements, so you can provide financial incentives for communities in order to be able to sustain what they're doing and sustain their, let's say, more sustainable solutions they're offering. And at the same time, you can offset the carbon footprint of some of the companies that are actually have higher carbon footprints that are hurting the environment, and so on and so forth. So yeah.
That very well sums up what you said, especially with regard to rural communities. And me being one who has worked in rural communities, I've seen what exactly the needs that is taken, especially with regard to agricultural sector, especially with regards to the food security. This actually dismantles the gap between indigenous security, food security, and other links which is related to sustainable development goals. And actually, this also busts a myth that usually associates climate change with regard to energy efficiency, with regard to energy overusage, and other modes of energy efficiency. So in this regard, it's very important that our world, and especially the planet, actually keeps in mind about the importance of sustainable development goals in terms of enriching their indigenous knowledge, sustainability, and focusing more on food security, more on energy efficiency, and other modes of sustainable productions. So in this sense, this particular podcast has given a lot of ideas regarding energy efficiency, with especially your expertise. You have mentioned that you have around 12 years of expertise in this particular field with regard to carbon efficiency, with regard to carbon impact programs, and other sorts of methods. So in this particular sense, I would like to thank you for appearing to a podcast session. Also, it has been a very nice talking to you, and especially to our audience who will be watching this program and who are watching this particular program currently. It is a very good attempt. And thank you, Ms. Yomna, and also to the BRICS Youth Energy Agency and the Juice Strata to our collaborative effort.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I personally learned a lot from just having this discussion, and I hope we get to meet soon and have more rigorous and insightful discussions like this.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.